Australia's Dingo Fence is claimed to be the longest in the world at over 5,600 kilometres, or nearly 3,500 miles for those few who resist metric. That's further than from New York to London. During the mid-1900s, it ran over 9,500 kilometres when it enclosed more country, but some sections fell into disrepair and a shorter version was later rebuilt. The main Dingo barrier fence runs from Jandowae on the Darling Downs, bends around the corner of New South Wales, squiggles across South Australia, past the breakaways, and finishes at the cliff edge almost on top of the Great Australian Bight. It's one of a number of substantial fences intended to exclude vermin from parts of the country. Some crossings may go unnoticed, but others are obvious, and the fence's layout and effects can be confusing. Early white settlers wanted Australia to feel more like the land they had left behind and, with little understanding of the ecology, introduced many plants and animals, including rabbits, foxes, camel, deer, cats, pigs, water buffalo, horses and goats. With no native predators, these all now thrive as ferals, causing significant damage to the environment. In Victoria, Thomas Austin missed his days of hunting rabbits in England, so in 1859 he imported and released 24 wild rabbits near Geelong, which bred as rabbits do and, unchecked, advanced across the land, at times stripping country bare. Less than 30 years later, the New South Wales government offered £25,000, or about $2 million today, for a successful method of eradicating the bunnies. That's the little hopping critters, not Mr. Austin. By 1893, the Queensland government decided they needed a rabbit-proof fence. It has since been progressively extended and modified according to the whims of various boards, and today meanders about 550 kilometres, joining the Dingo Fence near its eastern end. By 1901, rabbits had spread to the extent that the WA government began erecting a fence 2,500 kilometres to the west to protect its pasture lands. When finished 6 years later, number 1 fence was the longest unbroken fence in the world at over 1,800 kilometres. However, the rabbits had already penetrated beyond, so fence number 2 was added further west. A shorter fence number 3 runs east-west. These fences now have mixed benefits as they restrict the movement of rabbits, but also emus, wild dogs or dingoes, donkeys, goats, camels and kangaroos. The number 1 fence later featured in a book and a movie about 3 young girls escaping back home after being taken from their families by the government. They followed the rabbit-proof fence. Australia's rabbit population peaked at around 10 billion in 1920 and fed many families struggling during the 1930s depression. But following a number of culling programs, it is now estimated at around 200 million. Although many now consider the dingo as native, it was introduced perhaps over 5,000 years ago, probably by visitors from islands to the north. Whether regarded as native or feral, it has become the apex predator, although occasionally becomes a meal for crocodiles and is a target for humans. The dingo's arrival is linked to the mainland extinction of Tasmanian tigers, Tasmanian devils, and some flightless birds. When settlers' sheep arrived, dingoes soon found them an easy target, with one official figure reporting losses of 500,000 sheep and lambs per year. Soon there were calls for a fence to exclude them from grazing lands in the southeast. A fence had been built in the 1880s in an attempt to halt the rabbits, but it was ineffective and soon neglected, partly through the inability of state bureaucracies to cooperate. In the early 1900s, it was rebuilt as a dingo fence with a number of modifications since. Names for the fences have changed over the years, and today most of these fences link together, but we have fences intended to stop dingoes travelling southeast and rabbits from travelling north and west. However, none is completely effective, with many dingoes recorded on the wrong side of the fence, mostly in more isolated areas. The effect of these different fences can be complex, and other factors such as the proliferation of stock watering points also come into play. The fences disrupt ecosystems and restrict the movement of emus and many other animals. Recent research found that young kangaroos on the dingo side of the fence grew more quickly than those inside, but numbers remained stable, and vegetation was more diverse. Where they are shielded from the dingo, kangaroos, together with rabbits and other ferals, can multiply rapidly and overgraze a country, competing with livestock. Also, feral cats and foxes are more prolific when protected from dingoes, to the detriment of small native mammals. So, as predators, dingoes can benefit their environment, and not everyone is convinced of the fence's value. But cattle grazing is the main activity on the dingo side of the fence, with sheep farming mostly confined to inside the fence. Today, the 10,000 plus dingoes in Australia have varied legal status, depending on state and federal jurisdiction and whether on public or private land. They can be protected or declared vermin, or many categories in between. The dingo is quite agile, so most of the dingo fence stands between 1.8 metres, that's 6 foot, and 2 metres high, within a 10 metre wide cleared line. It also extends 30 centimetres below the ground to prevent dogs digging under. The fence is patrolled weekly by teams who each maintain their section. Damage can include burial by sand blows, impact by larger animals, and irregular flooding. When sections fail, graziers have reported losing dozens of lambs in a night to wild dog attack. At the other end of the scale, a number of much shorter fences have been built around wildlife sanctuaries across Australia to exclude feral cats, foxes and rabbits, and allow small native species to regenerate. It's thought that over 6 million feral cats kill around 1 billion native animals per year in Australia. At 44 kilometres, the longest of these is also the world's longest cat-proof fence. It is hoped these may save some species from extinction.